What do CEOs need to know about sales these days? A lot. Outdated sales strategies and tactics plague most companies today. Listen to what innovative CEOs and experts have to say about how to change all that with Sales Talk for CEOs. Welcome to another episode of Sales Talk for CEOs. It's always fun for me to interview the entrepreneurs that I got to know very early on when they were starting their companies. It just brings me great joy. So today I have one of those entrepreneurs with me who I've known almost since the beginning, and I'm excited to have him share his story. So Ross Rich from Accord started his company to provide deal transparency. Now, this is something I think is really important. You've heard me talk about this before. Our customers have changed, and especially with COVID, it was a very rapid change. They have so much information. It's information overload. They can, get a lot of it on their own. They really don't need the seller as much anymore, or they think they don't need the seller, right? And so as we meet our customers and help them along their journey, we want to make sure that they really understand, right? So we're guiding them, and we need to be transparent. And this is what makes these deals stickier and gives us customers for life. And Ross recognized this problem as well and put together with his co-founders this technology that allows you to have your sales teams working with your buying teams in a truly transparent way. And I'm going to let him tell you a little bit more about that. But Ross, welcome to the show.
So much for having me on, Allison. It's kind of a fun full circle moment to be here a few years into the journey after connecting, what was it, about 4 years ago?
Well, I'm so excited about what you guys have built. And I know there's some other softwares out there, and I'm friends with those CEOs too. They do similar things, but I have watched you guys really put up a very easy to use, right? Software that it really makes life easier. And I love that about it. So tell us a little bit more about Accord and what you provide.
Definitely, Alice. Well, maybe taking a step back of why I decided to start the company in the first place and the challenges we're solving. I was a seller for about 5 years at a company called Stripe, the payment fintech company, and found that deals really came down to three things. First, the why behind the deal. Why are we even talking in the first place? Why are you exploring something? Two, how are we going to get the thing done? How do we successfully evaluate, validate, and onboard? And three, who's who? Who needs to be involved internally, externally to get the deal done? The whole idea behind Accord is taking those best practices that pretty much every top seller uses, the why, the what, and the who, and building that into a software to make it really easy for both the seller and the customer to understand those three key aspects.
Yeah. So, I mean, there isn't a seller who has a complex deal out there that doesn't need software like this, truly. And I think the customers appreciate it so much. And I know you've heard that from customers that they really love being able to work in an environment where it's transparent, everything's in one place. It's not searching for emails and where did you put that and where did you send that, right? It's all together in one place. All right. So you mentioned you were with Stripe just before you started the company. And I know your brother is one of your co-founders. We'll talk about that in a minute. And also you have a CTO that was one of the co-founders as well. So here you were at Stripe, you were selling, and you get this idea. So tell us what happened. Like, what was the moment, and how did you wrangle your brother and your friend into doing this with you?
Totally. Yeah. So it was interesting because I'm like, this is the stuff that just keeps working. And I keep sharing some of these templates and best practices with my team. And, the feedback from both the sellers and the customers were overwhelmingly positive. So we're like, hey, this is so one-off and ad hoc, and it's really hard to get the whole team to use the thing because then you're updating it on the sheets and docs and wherever, then you're, uploading it to Salesforce. Like, this is the perfect example of where technology and software can help. So my brother was actually doing sales at the same time. He had done work at a couple startups before, and then kicked off at Google Cloud for a few years. And so we'd talk about work all the time, coming home. We actually lived together at the time. We're very close. We had an apartment in San Francisco, and he was like, "Yeah, you know what? Like, I think we're doing kind of the same stuff, and yes, learning all these best practices, and this is what leadership wants us to do, but not everyone's quite following these best practices." So we actually first put together a prototype. We weren't engineers by trade, but my brothers became our chief product officer and actually built a prototype with someone we found on Upwork, who was kind of a product designer. So first we kind of drew it out on a napkin, the classic piece of paper in our apartment, worked with this product designer for a few months. And then we took it to a few other VPs of sales and other sales leaders. And the feedback was incredibly positive. It was like, yes, this is exactly what I did as a seller. This is what my top sellers do. If we can build this into software and drive more accountability and enforcement of these best practices, I'm going to love it because we're going to hit our revenue targets. My sellers are going to love it because it's going to be easier for them to do. And our buyers, especially like you mentioned, are really going to appreciate the transparency and the prescriptive process, right? I always think about, when you're at an amazing restaurant and the waiter just, asks you a couple questions, hey, what do you like? And they just tell you, hey, this is what you're going to order. There's no better experience than that. You don't want to make all the decisions. You want someone who is an expert that has served thousands of meals there to tell you exactly how you're going to get the best experience. And that's how I think about what the top sellers and CSMs do.
The best experience. That's exactly right. That's what we're going for, right? So today in this highly competitive environment, there's plenty of space in the market for competitors, but to truly stand out and even really to keep up, we have to think about the experience, right? And when your product, is similar to others, which many are, then how you sell really matters. And that's why this deal transparency and providing these really exceptional customer experiences becomes so important. All right. So you and your brother, you're still both gainfully employed working on this. And gosh, you had that moment where you're like, we're going to quit our jobs. Tell us about that part.
Yeah, it was funny. I actually asked a mentor of mine that I met through my experience selling at Stripe. I asked, how do you make the leap, all this stuff? And the best advice that I got for folks that are considering that is it shouldn't feel like a crazy leap at the time, right? You should be able to figure out, how is this a couple hours on your Sunday? Then how is this, a big part of your weekend and evenings? And right by the time that you're ready to do it, it should be, hey, I have an overwhelming amount of work to do on this project. It feels like I'm not jumping into the ether, but I have something to start running with. And that's really what it felt like, slowly, having more conversations with folks in the VC world, with my friends that had started companies, all of that stuff. And it just felt like, hey, this is basically a full-time job now. But then, as you mentioned, the next big thing is finding a CTO to actually build the thing, right? This is why actually I think a lot of this technology doesn't exist today, is because there might be a lot of great technologists that don't understand the sales and go-to-market side of things. There's a lot of great sellers and go-to-market folks that can't build excellent technology. So we were really lucky to find Wayne actually through one of our first investors after we had built out this prototype, after we spent a lot of time. And I don't think we would have gotten such an exceptional partner on the technical side unless we've done all this work and helped someone understand what the business can really look like. And I think that's where a lot of people think, I need to get the whole team together to start. I need to get all this stuff together. And you don't. You just get started.
Just get started. Absolutely. And you did. And so had you actually sold anything before you brought Wayne on? Had you guys at least sold the idea, it sounds like, to a few people, and they were kind of waiting for, okay, so tell us when you have a product. So talk about those early days, and as you were developing, how you were also doing business development and getting people interested enough so that when the product was ready, you had people waiting.
Great question. And I think this is, again, where a lot of people will like, hey, we want to get the product right to start before we really start investing in customer development. But you're building a product in a vacuum. And no matter how smart you are and what your intuition is, and even though I was a top seller, building a new type of technology, you're not really going to know what to build and what's going to be most impactful until someone's actually using it or is paying for it first, right? So I think it was really helpful to have those hundreds of conversations, to start to understand, what would people pay for? What are the things, what are the ideas that are really driving them to continue the conversation and potentially invest in something like that? And that really helped us, I think, steer us down the right direction early on. But then I will say too, then it kind of doesn't matter. Okay, yes, it excites them, but then it doesn't matter until what actually provides value. Then you need to kind of go and engineer the thing for a handful of months. And I think that's even harder these days because people are so used to technology that's been built out for dozens of years and very consumer grade technology. So if it's going to be built into a workflow and isn't some back end, visualization or dashboard technology, the bar is really high. So it's a tough balance between what you need to build to get started, and really trying to launch with that MVP.
All right. Yes, I agree with that. And I think, you can get so many ideas that it's too many, right? Because people wanted to do this and they wanted to do that. At some point, you've got to settle in and say, this
Yeah.
is going to be what it is for now. And of course, you're always improving and updating the product, right? But tell us about your very first customer. So, was it somebody who maybe had beta tested or was working on it with you? And, the first paying customer, how did that happen?
Yeah, the first paying customer for us was Product Board and this sales leader Kevin, and it was interesting because it was an intro from a friend of a friend, someone I worked with at Stripe who knew this guy, and he was starting this VP of sales role, and he was really into mutual action plans. And the first kind of MVP that we built, obviously now it's much more broad with account planning and business case building, et cetera. But that was kind of the first piece of technology that we built, and it was great because it's like, hey, this is the thing that I'm trying to get my team to do more of. Hey, here's a software that you can really enforce those standards of excellence with, and we want to bring in this best practice. So it really aligned there. I would say what we weren't ready for was to onboard dozens of sellers, right? So it's like, hey, you might have the idea, you might have an early product, but the customer success piece, I think, is something in retrospect that we could have invested in earlier with, relative to even building up more of the product or marketing, right? Having someone who is responsible to work really closely that isn't just the founder, to onboard and really handhold those early customers, because you're not going to have enough product to get them there, right? So you really need to have that strong CS team early on.
Yeah, I've heard that from other founders as well. And I do think that sometimes we rush to do other things, like you said, maybe marketing or go hurry up and hire salespeople, right? So
Yeah.
as founders, we can get ourselves out of having to be the primary salesperson and being able to run our company more. But truly, especially with any kind of software, that onboarding becomes so crucial. But then after that, it's the user adoption. And if you don't get that, as we all know, there's no renewal, right? So that customer success piece is critical. So, okay, you got your first customer, a friend of a friend, somebody knew somebody. I think this is really something that is important to just pinpoint a little bit, because in the beginning, cold calling is just not a great way to go out and get new customers. It can be part of it, but using your network as a founder is so crucial. So, talk about how you grew sales from that first one using your network and what that looked like, and then kind of roll into when you started hiring some other people to help with customer success or sales or marketing or these other things.
Yeah, totally. So I think it's funny. I take the opposite approach of the quote unquote, stealth startup. It's like, how do you just tell your story and what you're passionate about to as many people as possible? And hopefully you're doing a good job of that, both refining your storytelling as well as getting the word out, where people start to come to you. They hear about it from someone who heard about it from someone, and kind of having this infectious energy and passion towards what you're building. And if you're building the right stuff in a great market, it'll come back to you. So that's how I thought about our early first customers and growing that. We built a lot of a solid following on LinkedIn, where just go where the best marketing idea is go where your customers are. And where do great sellers and sales leaders and CS leaders hang out? It's on LinkedIn. That's where they do a lot of their prospecting. That's they do a lot of their networking. And we were really lucky for that network to be built in, and kind of sharing, really building in public and sharing what we were learning from our early customers and what we were passionate about led to the first 100 clients in more of an inbound motion to start. But I'll pause there because I think there were some negative things that came from, I think, an early inbound motion where you're not necessarily picking and choosing your
Right.
customers and thinking about it from an ICP perspective, but it's a great way to pressure test an early product before you're really focusing on building a sustainable business. And that isn't what you're doing to start, which is, there's kind of two stages to, I think, that company development. First is a product that works, then it's a sustainable business model. And I don't think you can do both at the same time very well.
Yeah, no, you can't. You have to have that first piece, right? And I think you said two things that are super important. One is that passion, that entrepreneurial enthusiasm can really do a lot, if you let it out and let people see it, which you did. And that is how I met you originally, was LinkedIn, because you were out there talking to people, right? And
Mhm.
just conversing, having these conversations, sharing some ideas. It makes such a big difference. And that leads to the word of mouth, right? Oh, I heard about this. Have you heard about it? You should check it out. And that's what I was doing when I saw your product. I was like, oh, you guys should check this out. I just saw this new product. It's really fantastic. I love the founders. You should definitely check this out. So I was part of your word of mouth. And I think that's so important, and that momentum that you need in the beginning. But what's funny to me is we always have that momentum available to us. But for some reason, as our companies mature, we sort of forget about it, or just like, it's not part of our sales motion anymore, which I just think
Totally.
is absolutely crazy. Now, you guys are still young. You're just over 4 years old. So you're still using that entrepreneurial enthusiasm and passion and that momentum that you get from word of mouth, which is really important. But the next thing you said was, but an inbound motion, right? Right. Because it's everybody and anybody, and they're
Mhm.
not necessarily ideal. And
Yep.
so there's always this pivot moment when you have to think about, how do we get our ideal customers,
Mhm.
right? And that usually turns into an outbound motion. So tell us more about, you're realizing you've got all this incoming, but it's not exactly the right fit.
Totally. Yeah, the intentionality. And I think first you need to, have an hypothesis, talk about those problems and your passion for the solution, and learn a lot from those first, 5, 10, 100 customers, depending obviously on your ACV, how many that's going to be. But then I think we started to get more informed assumptions around who the ideal customers were. For us, it was, hey, we want to be less of the people telling you what your sales strategy should be and enforcing that, and more of finding folks that had a strong point of view around what execution excellence meant to them in terms of sales and onboarding and CS, and being a way to reinforce that and drive accountability around that transparent sales process. So people that already believed in that and had a set cadence for their sales playbook, and we're going to be the technology to enforce that. And so that made us think, hey, what stage of those companies that isn't a seed stage company, that isn't really a Series A stage company, that's someone with really a strong sales leader or CS leader, someone like that, that has a point of view around how we should be engaging with customers. So then we went back to the drawing board and how do we target them for both an inbound and outbound motion? So it's not necessarily just directly going out one to one. That's not, the only channel that works. When you think about more intentional ICP focus, it's what are the problems they're solving? Where are the sub locations online or in person that they're hanging out? And that's really changed, a similar motion that we started to, but with more intentionality around who those folks are, what stage businesses they're at, and what problems are they solving, um, for later stage businesses in our case.
Right. And the message that you use
Yeah.
so that they see themselves, right? So now
Yes.
you know who your ideal customer is better. You've got that. And yes, we need inbound and outbound. And I cannot ever stop saying that enough. The companies who are not driving inbound, you've simply got to do it. Your outbound motion is not enough. And it makes selling so hard for your salespeople when it's just an outbound motion. But when you do finally go, aha, we've had enough customers now to know our best customers look like this,
Yeah.
and we want to go find them and drive them inbound as well as find them on the outbound play. But I think what happens is we change our messaging so that they hear it, they see it, they go, "Oh, that's us. That's
Yes.
us. This is for us."
Totally. Yeah. It's funny because the solution and the features can be very similar. It's how and technology these days are so flexible, right? You might be selling infrastructure, APIs, or solutions that aren't necessarily application layer, and it's really about how you tell that story. And it's funny, you mentioned at the beginning differentiating. Everyone can sound the same. Everyone can say the same things from a marketing perspective or from, top of funnel. It's how you sell is going to be how they make their decision, right? You're never going to be able to show them more than maybe 10, 15% of your product and your solution. So really how you approach engaging with customers is so important. And that's kind of, what we try to espouse. And I think, the best go-to-market leaders see that as really the only way of differentiating yourself is really, how you sell is what you sell for the vast majority of companies that aren't PLG.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. So there are, as we said at the beginning, competitors that can do many of the same things. and they do them well even, and we love them. So no problem there, right? But we do really have to think about how we sell. And I believe that, especially in your case or with any software where you're selling that in a sales or marketing environment, you got to walk your talk, right? You got to use it. You got to believe, and you've got to
Yes.
use it and show them. That in itself will sell it, right? Because they go, "Oh, you're using this on my buying journey and it's helping me so much. I can see how it would help our customers." And I think that's such a beautiful thing. All right. So now you're out there selling. You had this inbound motion. You were doing a lot of it yourself, it sounds like. Where's that time where you said, "Okay, we need to hire some other sellers. I just simply can't run the company and do all of the selling. I'll be involved in sales, but I can't do it all," right? So what did that conversation look like, and how did you start to build your sales organization, and how did that go?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think I got a lot of competing advice around this. So maybe to share first kind of what those things that you'll find online and from conversations with people and maybe some of the mistakes that I made early. So I think a lot of the advice early is um, hire two salespeople to start instead of one, or at least two to three, so you can see is it is it you or is it them? And then I saw a lot of advice around maybe hire an SDR first and then maybe an AE to help with sourcing because that's like less um, challenging of a role, and maybe hire CS first. So, tried a bunch of stuff. The advice that I would give myself, looking back on the last 4 years is you should be taking yourself out of the number one first seller seat. Like you should be dragged out of that. Like it should be the number one blocker to your company's success and growth. Hire every other role before then. So I would have hired probably 1 to 2 CSMs to start, and really focusing on that before replacing myself with any other seller, because no one is going to learn the story and be able, people are buying you to start. Your technology, your comparable technology and solutions are going to be so much more mature in reality. Yes, like we love our products and proud of what we built, but like there's just no way in the first year or two of starting from 0 lines of code that you're going to have something that is 10x better than all of the alternatives out there, right? They're buying the vision. They're buying something that's a new approach to solving a problem that they're also passionate about, that they want to be part of the journey. That's just the reality of the situation. So you need to be the face. You need to be working with these companies and have someone partner closely with you on in the background to do the onboarding and CS. So that's the first thing. I wouldn't have focused on the sellers to start. I
I'm going to
also would
pause you right
hire.
there because
Yeah, go
I
for it.
could not agree with you more.
Okay, I'm
I,
glad.
of course, I've been
Yeah.
around a long time, as you know. I've heard it. I've heard it all, right? And my advice to CEOs who are founders at the beginning is you are your own first best salesperson,
Yeah.
and you should hire people to do accounting. People can do accounting. That is a very routine thing that people can do, right? There are other jobs in your company that you're doing that other people can do way better than you can. Move that stuff over. At the beginning, no one has that entrepreneurial enthusiasm like you. You will outsell every seller that you hire at the very beginning stages because you've got it all in your head. You've got that enthusiasm. You've got the connections. It's you, right? And
Mhm.
I always advise to hire the CSMs first. And the other thing that I advise, and I'm going to be curious to hear if you did this, is to hire yourself a sales assistant. You are the CEO of your company. You still have to wear other hats. You're not going to be able to delegate every single activity. And you're still
Mm.
going to have, even if get a great accountant, you're still going to have to review it. There's still stuff that has to be done every day, right?
Mhm.
So as the seller, you want to be out there making the relationships, building the relationships, listening, learning, guiding, right? And closing those deals. But you need someone to take care of all the details because you shouldn't be doing that. And also, you're probably not very good at it because most entrepreneurial minds just don't work that way, right? So, hiring those CSMs and then hiring yourself a sales assistant before you hire your first sellers. And one of the great things you can do when you have a sales assistant is they can document
Yeah.
everything that you do repeatedly so that then when you do hire salespeople, you've got a playbook. It's already written down and you've been refining it by doing and then looking and going, yep, that's what I did. I've done it 10 times now. It works every time. That goes in the playbook. Bam. But you're not the one responsible for putting it there because you don't have time. You've got someone doing it.
Yes, I definitely wish that we did that earlier on. It's also easier to understand how to get better yourself selling, to have that mirror to you, right? Like you're so in all these deals. I think having that very operationally minded, maybe not the best seller themselves,
Right.
but someone who is very structured that can help. You should be past capacity. You should be at 120% capacity, just working with these customers and prospects, and someone supporting you on that and helping document and having the confidence that if you were to bring in someone, they can at least get 50-60% of the way there. I would also say that for seller role and CSM role, hire more senior than you think, and it's going to be more expensive, but you're never going to have the bandwidth to up level people. You're going to be there's going to be everything on fire. You're going to have to be sharing feedback with the product team. You're going to have to work with engineering. You're going to have all of that stuff. You always think, hey, I'm going to hire this person. They're so they're going to be great. I would say spend that extra 20, 30, 40% more and make sure someone's going to absolutely nail it, instead of doing the two people. If you're going to find two people that you can potentially hire, one is clearly going to be better than the other. I don't care what you say. And take that risk and make that bet on someone who is more proven, that you feel more confident about. That's also something that I think maybe when you start to add reps 2 at a time makes a ton of sense. It's competitive. You get to onboard them at the same time, all that stuff for sure. That number one, first CSM and first seller, I think makes sense to hire the cream of the crop and make sure it's someone that's more proven.
Yeah, someone that definitely is entrepreneurial and understands, right? They don't come out of a big company. I've seen that mistake. Oh, we need to get somebody
Yes.
from a big company who knows how to call on these big companies. Yeah, no, you don't, because they're used to having so much support. You're an entrepreneur, you're scrappy. You don't have all that. They need to come in and dig in, right? And do it. So you need people who are what I call utility players, sellers who are
Yes.
utility players. They know how to do
Yes.
everything. But if you have that support person that's been supporting you, they can do a lot of the onboarding of your new seller and your CSM because they know they've been watching you. They know what needs to be
Mhm.
done. They've watched you do it and they've been documenting it. So it makes life so much easier. And I myself have been known to tell CEOs hire 2 sellers at a time because there is some merit to that. But in the beginning, right, if you can just get one really good one, that's awesome. But after that, I think there's a lot of economies of
Yeah.
scale
I agree. After maybe
doing
the
it that
first
way,
person
right?
to, yeah, because again, in my experience, um, when it's you and you're handing it off to someone, it is hard to focus on two people. And if you're forced to make a decision, I think instinctually you'll probably pick the right one, and it can feel maybe riskier, but you got to get one right. And but then I agree, hiring 2 or 3 at a time after then, once you have it documented, once you've proven that someone else can have the same conversations as you, I think makes a ton of sense. But obviously every company's a bit different.
The other mistake that I see too, Ross, is that people hire salespeople before they have lead flow, right? They have
Yeah.
so if you as a CEO are at capacity and there's more leads than you can handle, that's when you hire them. But somehow I don't know what it is because you were in sales before you started your company, so CEOs and other leaders somehow believe that salespeople can just magically pull leads out of the air. I was going to say but I mean air. I mean, like they can't. Like what do they think? You have to have lead flow, and that's why these inbound motions are so important when you're starting up, and to have this lead flow going before you keep hiring salespeople. Adding more salespeople doesn't equal more sales, right?
Mhm.
We've got to have the lead flow, and that is always just a dangerous ground that I see people treading on. So, how did you guys get the lead flow when you decided, okay, we're going to hire some salespeople?
Totally. And even I think one of the false flags we had was, hey, I'm working a lot of deals. Let's hire people. Are we working a lot of deals that are in our ICP that we want to close, that are
Right.
closing for an amount that makes sense to scale that out? That was also, I think, we could have gone through faster revs of getting to the ICP faster, learning those use cases, et cetera. If it was myself and one or two CSMs, then just the, every one person at a very small company adds layers of communication, less direct feedback to product teams and other things. So even if you're busy, is it resulting in things that are going to be long that you want to scale? People help with scaling; they don't help solve problems. And I think that's also
Right.
a mistake that we make as founders is, hey, this is what a team at the next level looks like. And hey, they're going to help us solve these problems. You're going to be the best team. The founding team is going to be the best team to solve those foundational problems. Then you hire people to do the thing that you figured out. So also that's something that I learned. But yeah, in terms of lead flow, yes. Are you talking to the people that you actually want more people to talk to instead of just keeping you busy? I would say investing in a full-time it's going to be different for every channel. Like the channel that you feel most confident about. For us, it was inbound through our own content and LinkedIn as a key channel. But obviously, it's going to be different for every team. Maybe it's conferences. Maybe it's a robust market where you can go to conferences in your space and show up there. So one person who's going to help you coordinate that and go there, maybe that's your channel. Whatever it is, having a full-time person do that, not just be one of the founders or someone's part-time gig, I think is a requirement before, probably a quarter or two before you hire those first AEs. Because yeah, like you said, they're not going to be successful, and the best reps aren't going to stay around at a company
If
where they're
there's
not
no
able to
leads,
hit their
they're not gonna
targets.
stick around,
No,
right, yeah.
no, the
So
people.
what year
Yeah.
were you in before you decided to hire a seller?
About a year and a half, 2 years in, we had a product where we felt confident that we should be onboarding more than those early adopter and innovators too. We were building our inbound engine. I would say I think we were not yet at the point where we were working with our ideal customers. I think there were a lot of people that were excited about what we're working on from companies that were very early stage who were still looking for, hey, aspirationally, we want to do what Accord promises, but maybe we're not there yet in terms of our development of our go-to-market motion. So we started to scale that, which again, in learning, I think we could have learned that lesson faster if we had more slowly hired those first reps and had closer feedback loops from myself to CS and product, and really thought about who are the ideal customers to work with. But at the same time, like hindsight's 2020, maybe we wouldn't have learned that lesson unless we forced a rep or two to have to close those deals and make them successful and find out what we learned from that. So I think as long as you're not getting too far ahead of your skis in terms of burn and those lessons that you can learn really quickly and making adjustments, you'll probably be fine. But that's kind of how we figured it out through some of those mistakes.
Okay, so what does your sales team look like now? And, and your CSM, your go-to-market team, what does it look like now? So you're 4 years in, not, you still got a lot of ways to grow, but where are you now? And then we'll talk about where you're growing to.
Totally. Yeah. So maybe starting the top of the funnel down to from marketing sales to CS. So marketing, we have a head of marketing, really, really talented head of marketing with a demand gen background. And I think it's interesting. I hear a lot of feedback around, hey, your first marketer should be a product marketer. I think similar to sales, like it should be your CEO that's selling is probably your product marketer to start, and someone who is operationalizing a lot of the things that you should be doing and getting your voice out there. It's probably a demand gen leader. You need those leads. You need the market hearing about you, not just working on your brand or positioning. So I would say someone who can help translate the learnings from your sales team and CS team to the market and being a more demand gen focus. And then we
Yeah. Okay.
have,
So this
yeah,
is really important. So I'm going to pause you
yeah,
because I see this mistake all the time, hiring marketers that are branders. You can outsource that stuff. Somebody can, make pretty stuff and brand you and get your
yeah.
brand language
That's
and
not the
all of that
start.
stuff.
Yeah,
You can help them. But demand gen, okay, so most marketers, hello, no offense to
are not.
anyone,
Yeah,
most marketers are not demand gen. They
no, they're
do
not.
not know demand gen. They do not understand demand gen. And they will come in and spend a lot of money on marketing, which is
Yeah,
important, but it is not demand gen. You need demand gen first. It really doesn't matter. As long as the information's there, it doesn't have to be super pretty and all the messaging doesn't have to be perfect. It has to be authentic, not perfect,
yes,
right? So demand gen is the key. So I always say, get somebody to do demand gen, outsource that other marketing stuff because it's not even full time when you're starting up. It's just get it good enough, right? So yes, okay, you hired a demand gen person. Yay, congratulations. Let's go from there.
yeah. Someone who wants to own a number, not
Right.
OKRs around relaunching your brand. So yeah, that's the first thing. And then we layered on an amazing generalist with her. so that can accelerate a lot of the different channels and all the things you need to do with HubSpot and other things to work effectively with sales and CS. So that was the first kind of piece, is marketing. And then we have a number, like you said, of freelancers. So you have a team of 3 or 4 people that will call on, that'll do a few hours a week, but you don't want to take on that tax of having them full time at your company yet in terms of cost. So 2 full-time, 1 leader, and then a handful of contacts that she has from working in the industry for a while. So it's kind of, a team of 2 that probably does a team of 4's worth of work. Then in terms of sales, we've tried a couple versions of trying to build out, more of a sales lead, VP of sales. But honestly, myself coming from a sales background and being a top seller myself, I found it more effective to co-sell with a team and take more of that now like executive sponsor role, and honestly more of an SDR. Like, I look at myself as someone who can actually create more conversations. And once we have that energy and get in the door and share the technology, the team can take that. So I kind of look at myself as, how do I drive the energy and find the right people who probably won't talk to an AE or a manager, but will talk to the founder, help them understand where we can fit in and stay close with that executive and help their teams work together. That's kind of how we've architected our team. So we have an
And this
enterprise
is
team, a
one of the
mid-market
key
team, and I stay
reasons,
close.
Ross, that you are doing so well. I cannot say this enough. And I really firmly believe this. I tell it to CEOs all the time. Again, I don't care where you are in the life cycle of your company. This works when the CEO is the chief lead generator, right? Because
there's no other way.
People will talk to the CEO. You can step into situations. You have a network that your salespeople don't have. You have all this great stuff that will help bring business to your company, and you've locked yourself away, and your salespeople don't get to benefit from that. What?
Yeah.
So I love, love, love that you're doing that. And I always say, the CEO will always have a role in sales, but that role changes as the company matures. And I love that you call, yourself an SDR, right? You're
from
the
AE
one
to SDR. That's what you graduate to, because someone else can close the deals. Before, no one else could close the deal. Now, all of a sudden, someone else can close them. Yeah.
I just love that so much. I talked to another CEO on the show who was out on his bicycle in New York City, acting as a, bicycle messenger, dropping off really awesome packages to the people that he wanted to be able to talk to, right?
I
So
love that.
he was really doing the lead gen. And then, as he hired salespeople, he had this great lead flow going from his activities. It's just so important.
And I'm not some genius. I did not figure this out by myself. I had to make the mistake of all the advice that you get. You got to step away. You got to work on the business, not in the business. I'm like, yeah, maybe when you hit 10 to 20 million dollars of ARR, or you're competing in a category that's super developed where timing was right and you're NVIDIA and you fell into this thing. But that's not going to be for 99% of founders and CEOs. You're going to have to work on that until you have a flywheel created, which is probably a handful of millions of dollars of ARR in inbound lead flow. So it's been really energizing actually stepping back into it and working in the business, not on the business, which, sub 10 or 20 mil, that's the entirety of your business, right?
Right. And you've got to do both. I mean, it's just the life of an entrepreneur. You've got to be able to step away and work on your business, and then you've got to step back in and work in it.
Both.
But when
Exactly.
you step into work in it, you got to do it smart. You got to do the things that matter most, like what you're doing right now by generating leads to your team. So how many salespeople do you have right now that you're helping generate leads for?
So we only have 3 sellers, but we decided to hire much more seasoned, basically pay, like I was talking about, the premium of 40, 50%, and say, hey, we're not going to have a team of people that are hitting 60%, 70%. We're going to have a team of hitting 100, 110%, who are going to be super happy, who are the top sellers, who are going to be able to be trusted and not need a lot of management and layers, and are going to effectively communicate to product, are going to effectively partner with CS and marketing. And that's kind of, what we've done. And I think they're also able to generate leads because they can show up in a different way. They can work kind of up and down the stack of a deal to the executives, to the ICs on the deal, which I think gives you a lot more, like you said, like those utility players who have been at other early stage startups that might have a chance to be ahead of sales, maybe somewhere else, where, hey, we can get them on as ICs without a lot of, leader, like reporting directly to me. So that's kind of how we've thought about it. Slightly different approach.
Yeah, and it's working great. And you guys have just done so many remarkable things. I really love it. So, what's next for Accord? You're gonna continue growing your team, I'm sure. Continue your role in sales, which I love. And what's coming next?
Yeah, the next year for us, I think, is really about executing, which is exciting. I don't think there's a lot of, we've worked on the product for about 4 years. We have a great base of just over 150 customers. And I think it's really working with a smaller number of people who can get more value of the product and slightly further at market. So that's kind of where the focus across sales, marketing, CS, and product is really honing in on that ideal customer profile, trying to work fewer deals, fewer leads that really speak to who we strongly believe we can add the most value to, and executing on that strategy. And in terms of growth, it's more from a CS perspective than anything. How can we make sure that these early customers are wildly successful? And that's what the next couple quarters look like for us.
I like that you said wildly successful. I think that's so important. I'm always reminding people that having a big, huge customer list is terrific, but what's even better is having successful customers. Customers who are successful using what you sold them. They love it. They can't live without it. They talk about it. They are your word of mouth,
Yeah,
right?
it's a force
Um,
multiplier for business. Yeah,
Absolutely force multiplier. There's nothing better than successful customers because they will shout it from the rooftops. Like, this is what we use. This is how we do it. And their own customers, become your customers because they enjoyed that buying journey so much using your tools. Right. So
completely.
it's just simply amazing. Oh my gosh, Ross, thank you so much for taking time out to be on the show today. You've shared a lot about your journey that I know everyone will really appreciate. So I'm sure some people are going to be really interested in finding out more about Accord. So just kind of tell us where they can find you and anywhere you want them to connect with you.
Totally. Yeah. Feel free to shoot me a note on LinkedIn, just Ross Rich, or if you're curious about what Accord does, it's in Accord. Yeah. Thanks so much, Alice, for having me. It was fun to reflect on some of the mistakes and learning from the last 4 years. And yeah, it's always great to chat.
Yeah. And also just remember the rule. If you are going to approach Ross on LinkedIn, you have to tell him that you heard him on my show so he'll accept your connection. A little tricky there, but yeah, check out Accord. It's inaccord.com. I love it. I think you'll love it too. And Ross is, as you can see, a great approachable person. So please connect with him. Thanks again for being on the show.
Thank you.